What's the name again?
Bob Corby.
How do you spell that?
Oh, of course, yes, Bob Corby, of course. I owe everything to Bob. No, I owe everything to him.
Bob Corby, oh, dude, he still owes me $5, that son of a bitch.
Bob was just somebody else that, said, hey, do a strip for my first mini comic. And it was called O Comics. And so I just did like one little drawing or something, I believe, and sent it to him. And that it was in his first issue. And then he's had many after that, and huge, thick anthologies since.
I've known Bob about as long as I've been doing small press, and he'd been talking about doing a show ever since the Spirits of Independence show came to town in '95.
Bob Corby is the greatest small press creator of all, the best artist, the most creative mind, and I'm saying that because he's putting me up for the night.
Bob's the perfect guy for this show because, he does this kind of out of his own pocket. I don't know if he makes money doing it. In fact, I know he doesn't make a lot of money if he makes any at all. And he really does this because he loves it and it's fun for him.
I know he does this out of sheer love for the medium. I don't think he's ever made a nickel off of these shows. He's probably lost money on them, but he just loves doing it. And he's doing it for all of us so we can get together here and see each other year after year. He's a hero.
He might make a little bit of money on this, but I'm sure the amount of work, doesn't equal whatever that is. He's really to be admired, giving a lot of people a start, a chance to show their work, which is important to all these young cartoonists. And who knows, in this very room we might have the next Kevin Eastman or Harvey Pekar or Carol Tyler. We might have the next Carol Tyler in this very room.
It kind of starts way back in Mid-Ohio-Con 1988. I just put together the first O Comics right here, which I still have copies of, which was basically Ohio Comics. It was because I noticed I got involved in the small press stuff with review zines like Fantasy Frontiers, and later on the small press comic explosion. And I noticed there was a lot of small pressers here in Columbus and in Ohio in general. So I thought, yeah, let's get together, put a book together, and take it to the Mid-Ohio-Con. So we did the first issue, and had a table there by a door where the snow was blown in, and where everybody. Yeah.
That was 1988.
Yep, that was 1988. Yep. As it turned out that day is about 13, 14 small pressers showed up out of the woodwork, and I just, I always thought I was kind of, there's a few of us around, but I was kind of surprised that so many people showed up, and then that kind of made me think a little bit. And I thought, I can't do a show with small press people. I just wouldn't work. So dismissed it at that. And then in 1995, Dave Sim announced the Spirits of Independence shows across the country.
He's the guy that does Cerebus. He was the first guy to sit down and tell himself, I'm going to do a 300-issue miniseries. And he finished it.
And the first one was going to be here in Columbus, so I just jumped on that. I think I was the second guy to sign up. Me and, I can't think of his name, who lives in Cleveland now. But so I thought, that's great. So we signed up. I think there was 30 or so exhibitors in that first show, and a reasonable number of people showed up. And then the next year, it kind of just disappeared. Nobody picked it up. It didn't really move anywhere. So I let it go for a few years, and then about 2000, year 2000, I just decided to go ahead and do one.
S.P.A.C.E actually happened when Bob Corby phoned me in 2001, I'm pretty sure, and wanted to know if I would come to his show, and I basically just said, you're in Columbus, Ohio, get Jeff Smith. It's crazy getting somebody to come down from Canada. But then he came back and asked me again the next year, and I thought, well, okay, if he asked me twice, I'm going to come down.
That's how we came up with the space and put it on, and the first one was a disaster.
The first show didn't go that well. Bob was a little discouraged, and I talked to him during and after the show, and I think he was pretty close to pulling the plug on the next year's show because, the vendors were disenchanted and all this, and But I think I persuaded him to do it again. I told him it'll take time, it'll catch on, give it a 2-3 years, it'll build. And it has.
All the exhibitors really wanted to make it work, so they were all agreed to come back. So we did a second show, and this time Dave Sim did show up, and we improved attendance a lot.
I was here at the first one, I think. Yep. I don't know how many years ago that was. 10?
I went to the first one, but I've got a damaged memory, so I can't tell you much about it. I remember being startled at the very concept of it. I never dreamed there would be a convention just for small press.
I've been with S.P.A.C.E. since it started. Since Corby did the very first one, we did it in this multi-purpose building on the fairgrounds. As soon as they herded the cows out, we came in.
Bruce Crislip, standing right over there, dragged me to a convention. Is that what this is called? A convention? 2 years ago?
I found out about it the first year, like a week after it happened. And then I was here 2001 through 2005. I missed last year, and here I am again. But the first year was Space 2000, which of course, the first thing that came to my mind was they missed out on a bet, because they should have started a year earlier and they could have named it after that great Martin Landau TV series, Space 1999.
I've been at this place for 2 years. Where I guess the previous location, I probably went to that for 3 or 4 years, so do the math. 7 years, we'll say 7 years.
Well, it's all small press people. It's getting bigger every year, and the people are really friendly. They're really friendly, they're really creative, and it's some shows can get a little competitive, and sometimes shows can make you feel like an outsider if you're not working in the particular genre that they're most interested in. And some people can make you feel creepy for being a grown-up and there's nothing but kids around.
The only reason I originally came to Space-Con was to see Tim Corrigan, because I'd met him in Chicago every year I went, and I loved talking to him, and he always contributed to my slam bang. He still is. And so I felt, I'd like to check up and see how he's doing, and he brought his whole family to the Space-Con. It's like a huge family event.
I had asked Dave about coming to the first Space show, and he said no, he's too busy. He's got to finish service. So, he was getting closer to the end of the 300 issue run. And then, we had the disastrous showing in the first year. So I did send him another letter, and I said, we're going to do it one more time if you're interested. And I kind of thought, okay, we're going to go through the motions one more time, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, no problem. And then I got a phone call from Dave one day, and he just said, I'm going to come to Space. And I said, great. And he said, what I want to do is start like a grant, if you will, or a prize for small pressers, so that they, to help fund their publishing.
Yeah, it just seemed like a good idea to have a festival prize. I'd always wanted to come up with something that would honor Gene Day's memory.
Gene Day being a small presser from back in the 70s, and worked on Marvel's Master of Kung Fu, which is really great stuff.
He was such an enormous help to so many people who wanted to self-publish or wanted just to write and draw. And if they were completely hopeless, he could still get a couple of drawings out of them. And if they weren't completely hopeless, he would take them up to the next level. And for me, without his encouragement, I would never have had the confidence to say, I'm just going to do Cerebus, and if it doesn't work, that's fine.
So he wanted to do that, and he said, I'd like to start it at Space. And he says, it's kind of nice, you have already established the show, and it is very oriented towards small press work. There's not a lot of big names there, and also that's kind of the place he thought was a good place to do this. So he came in 2001, and we collected maybe about 50 books.
3 or 4 generations of creators, and it's a very satisfying feeling. So for those of you who are just now getting in on the ground floor of what is probably a dying industry, you can all blame me. So, thank you all very much, and keep telling your stories.
Thank you and welcome to the 2007 Howard E. Day Memorial Prize Ceremony. Well, it looked for a while there as if the ceremony wasn't going to happen at all. But now that the long, arduous, and costly small press writers' strike is over, finally, once again, we can all look forward to seeing our favorite self-published and small press titles seeing print with the clockwork regularity and timeliness for which so many of us in this field will be, as President Abraham Lincoln said about his own Gettysburg Address, little noted nor long remembered. Robert James Algeo is our next nominee for the first issue of Skull Pen, whose lead character is a ballpoint pen with a skull on top of it. I have many names. You may call me Skull Pen. Skull Pen only has one song on his iPod, Mother by Danzig. Mother screams across the cosmos like the entrails of Napoleon, drawn across the bones of Hitler as they stretch the skin of Stalin across a drum shell made of the solidified essence of napalm and genocide. It's just this sort of whimsical, lighthearted, all-ages family entertainment we see too little of in the comic field these days.
This is my 4th year at S.P.A.C.E, and S.P.A.C.E is actually the show where I started out. And I remember that I've been doing a comic called Lackluster World for 4 years now. And I remember the first show coming here and being really nervous because I'd never been to any convention before. I'd never done a comic book before, and it was really just great. In fact, that was probably one of my best shows to date. Was that first one, just because it was such a relief to see that there was so much, I guess, camaraderie with everything. And ever since, it's kind of been my show, and it's always been my favorite one. And I think it's because I have a certain sentimentality with it that I don't get with any other show.
This year, I'm here because I'm now teaching comics at the University of Cincinnati, and the first thing I did was teach them how to make a mini comic.
I knew a lot of these people from the Chicago Con back in 1987 and 88, 89, 90. I went to all those. I met Matt Feazell, Tim Corrigan, Larry Blake. All these people were there. But then I dropped out of small press for about 10 years or so. And then it wasn't until 2004, I believe, or 5. I think it might have been 2005 when I decided to check out the S.P.A.C.E Con, and I was still living in Washington at the time. So I went to visit my parents, and then I flew from there to here for the con to check it out. And so that was the first time I'd experienced the S.P.A.C.E Con.
This is very inspiring to see how people have been able to take whatever they're interested in terms of their comic art, and there's just about every level represented here. So that's really, really good for especially my students to see, the college level, because they're emerging and they're, kind of getting into that. And I just love seeing how people have interpreted the form, everything from little hand-pressed, handmade paper books to fully published anthologies. Just great.
So far, I'm finding everybody was like really friendly, really open community. It's exactly the kind of thing that I was hoping for. Really, just meeting a lot of people, a lot of fellow comic artists, and so forth. And it's been really fun. Going to go home with a lot of people's books.
We try every year to try to get more people involved and bring more people through the door. As opposed to a regular comic book convention, I think there's more things of interest to people who aren't even interested in comics here than there would be at a regular convention. So we've been trying to work on that and just try to impress upon people the difference that there is.
The way S.P.A.C.E. Compares to some of the more well-known shows like S.P.A.C.E. and A.P.E. is, well, I guess S.P.A.C.E. and A.P.E. are more about there's so much publicity behind them, and like you have all these kind of, I guess, big name small pressers that go there, and everybody's kind of focused on sales and releasing new books. And S.P.A.C.E., of course, you get some of that, and you want some of that, but S.P.A.C.E., it's just a bunch of guys and girls sitting around, hanging out, and it's kind of like a little gathering more than it is a convention.
You go to like the bigger shows, the tables are more expensive, and find yourself competing against, hey, Fantagraphics just put out a $40 book that everybody's going to buy, and now they have no money left to buy anything else. Then this is great because everybody's on equal footing. Your book is just as much a chance to be bought as everybody else's. And while it would be nice to see some of the larger publishers come in, maybe give the show a higher profile, I think it's great.
I kind of went online and I kind of got involved with some of the online communities or smallpresscomics.com, and that was one of the places where I heard about S.P.A.C.E. and it was great for us because my wife she's originally from Columbus, so we had relatives to stay with here, and we came. I think our first convention was I think it was 2002 or 2003 when it was at the Ag Center, and we had a great time. And we made some fantastic friendships that we still carry on. And that's one of the main reasons we come back here is because I get to kind of meet up with the folks that we might correspond via email over the course of the year, but to kind of sit with them, after S.P.A.C.E. or before S.P.A.C.E. and have a few drinks and just talk about comics or what we're working on is actually one of my favorite things.
Oh, it's going to explode. The technology available today for people to make their own comics, films, CDs, it's power to the people. It really is, And I think the huge mega corporations that produce those things, comics, films, and so on, they've had to dilute their products so much to appeal to a mass audience. It's all become so innocuous and inoffensive and lame, people are going to lose interest in it and will be more interested, I think, in the future in the work of the individual rather than the product being produced by the corporation.
I'll tell you something, people who get into this, it's kind of guilty because it's almost like, okay, what are you going to do with your life? You're going to scribble comics, or you could go to law school. And the fact is, I don't have the things for going into law school. I basically set up to be a starving artist, and they figured that out when I went into radio.
Well, I've been to Chicago. I've not done San Diego, and compared to those larger shows, I prefer these smaller shows because, people go to those larger shows to go see stormtroopers, and they want to go talk to Brian Michael Bendis and get their book signed by Frank Miller. I don't know. I think people come here because they generally just want to genuinely want to see good comics and good artwork and good stories and interesting people.
I used to go to the Chicago cons until the Wizard people took over. That was my last year. It was their first year.
About 20 years ago, I was at the Chicago Comic Con and met up with Matt Fizzell, and he pointed me in the direction of the small press room, which is like at the bottom of a flight of stairs in a room that was about as big as a janitor's closet.
Well, I haven't been to Chicago Con in about 10 years. But the last one I went to was jammed with people. But I think it was like $35 to get in, or something around there. And That was too much money. The tables were too much money.
What's the last mainstream?
I did the math on it, and it got to the point where it would cost me like $1,000 to spend a weekend at one of these shows. You know, by taking your travel expenses, your hotel, your table, your purchasing. You're going to buy other stuff, food, and everything else. And I and a lot of other people are not in a position to drop that kind of money over a weekend. So I don't go to the major cons anymore, and I'm not that interested in their products anymore.
The people that used to run ChicagoCon bent over backwards for small press, and it sort of became the place to be if you were in small press. A lot of us met each other in person for the first time after corresponding for years at those conventions. It just was like a family reunion, and so is this.
San Diego, I think they're still they just want the mainstream movies, books, things that are mass marketed, and there are a lot of small press tables, but every year it's less and less because they keep raising the price more and more.
There is no comparison. I mean, at that point, 20 years ago, it was still much more comic-centric. Now the larger shows have turned into more media-based or oriented. So I think in terms of the quality of material and the number of individual voices, S.P.A.C.E. and the other independent shows have the larger media shows leave them behind.
I have sort of a love-hate attitude toward San Diego. I mean, it's fantastic. I love seeing all the people out there, but the past several years, I think it's sort of reached the tipping point and gone beyond that, where it's too big for its own good.
You know, whenever I can sell a comic, if I can sell it for $1, I much prefer to do that because for me, I get more of a joy knowing that people are kind of reading my comics and have an interaction with it, rather than making a profit off it. You know, it's business is so competitive these days that really the people who make profits are Marvels, DCs, and stuff like that. Everyone kind of does it. Everyone else does it for the love of the comics, the love of the art. S.P.A.C.E. is the kind of place that you're going to find comics like that. People are going to put a lot of love into the work they do, and they're going to sell it for $1 or $2, sometimes $3, depending on if there's color and stuff like that. So, like I said, it's a great form of entertainment.
It's frustrating to hear people complain about the state of entertainment when there are so many ways for them to make their own stories and tell their own stories.
Back in the day where you can get a DC or comic book for 50 cents, this has kind of replaced that, I find it much more engaging and exciting. You're going to find a whole range of stuff out there.
I think it continues to improve every year, just in the people, the artists that it attracts and the type of material that's available.
You literally can't get around to see everything in the place during the time of the convention, and there's just something wrong with that.
I think there are a lot more options out there for folks these days compared to when I was still cutting and pasting with glue stick and scissors at Kinko's at 3 a.m. I think it can go as far as the individual who's looking for a way to express themselves. There are any number of options or means, materials, software, paper. It's all out there. It's just a matter of how a person wants to do it and when.
I think it's its own genre in that I think it's going to always have this wonderful presence, because the thing I come up against with my students is, and I say this to them all the time, you're too oriented towards the screen, you guys. There are things out there, paper, ink, there's stories that you can tell. So there's something very tactile and tangible about actually, creating work and creating little mini comics and creating books.
Every year since then, I've said to him a couple of times, if S.P.A.C.E. ever becomes a committee-run comic book convention where I don't know who's running what and I can't get a straight answer out of anybody, I'm probably going to stop coming down. But as long as it's you and Kathy, and Kathy's his wife, Megan, his daughter, Ron, his brother, those are the people running the show. I'll keep coming back as long as it's just a mom and pop operation. And so far, so good.
Space is really, I think, more of kind of the small press, self-published comics. There's stuff here that you're not going to be able to find anywhere else. So, I love coming here because, like I said, I'm not going to be able to find certain books, certain creators at comic shops or at bigger comic shows. I can find them here.
These cons are great. They seem to be getting better each year. I hope it just continues.
I kind of thought we would start attracting more bigger names at some point, but I don't know if that's happening. But it does seem to be growing here locally, and maybe that's what it needs to be. I think we've always tried to maintain it as a real small press show, and just worked it from there. And it's always fun to walk in here and see all the different work that you don't see anywhere else.
As S.P.A.C.E has developed, so have we as comic creators. My wife and I do a mini comic called Mr. Big, and we kind of debuted it here at S.P.A.C.E some years ago, and over the course of years we did a bunch of them, and we've got actually Littlefoot Comics has compiled it into a trade publication, and so we're debuting that here at this show. So we've kind of grown along with S.P.A.C.E, and I look forward to doing S.P.A.C.E next year and the year after and the year after.
Listen, fans, listen, people. If you don't actually pick up that pen and dip it in the inkwell, get rid of your markers. They know what I'm talking about. Dip that pen in the inkwell, get to work, quit your bitching, turn the TV off, stop partying, get down to it. Seriously, you just have to do the work and then come to things like this. Come to events. S.P.A.C.E is fabulous for the Midwest. Come to S.P.A.C.E with your work, talk to people, network, do it. That's all I can say.
Yes, buy more comics, especially if they have the words plastic and or farm in the title. It'd be awesome.
An old cowpoke was camping out beneath a starry sky.
Oh, be sure you get the giant ball of balloons going in over there, because I know some booths drop balloons when they sell a book.
He choked upon a chicken bone and laid over to die.
Hasta la vista, baby.
Then he awoke and heard a voice that caught him quite off guard.
No, I do that personally on my booth. We do that every time we sell a book, or if anyone even looks over at our tables.
A spirit in a three-piece suit then handed him a card. Yippee-yi-yay, yippee-yi-yo. Ghost lawyers in the sky.
be the next pope. When this one kicks the bucket, I hope they elect me pope. If not pope, pope is good. I'd like to be the first pope in space. Set up the new moon base Vatican. That would be awesome. And also, the first pope in space. You never thought that. It's like a no-brainer. Why not send the pope to space? Be closer to God.
It's my twin sister.
Twin. Oh, I do see a resemblance.